You are standing on the cool, star-tiled floor of the Alhambra's Court of the Lions. It is January of the year 1492. But that number, that demarcation of time, feels hollow. The world has not just turned a page, it has been torn from its binding. Outside, in the city of Granada, the air is thick with the scent of myrrh, sweat, and cold iron. For the first time in 781 years, the Iberian Peninsula is whole, united under the sign of the cross. The last emir, Muhammad XII, has surrendered the keys to his city, his tears earning him the name El-Zagoibi, the unlucky one. For you, standing in the cold shadow of this perfect, conquered palace, it feels like the end of history itself. You watch them, the Catholic monarchs, Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. They are not figures from a tapestry. They are flesh and blood, etched with the exhaustion of a decade-long war. Isabella's gaze is flint. Her piety, a furnace that has forged a nation from disparate kingdoms. Ferdinand's eyes are narrower, his mind a web of calculations, constantly weighing threat and opportunity. The crusade is over. The great enemy is vanquished. A generation of men, born in the saddle with a sword in their hand, now stands idle, their holy purpose fulfilled. This is a dangerous moment. An army without a war is a fire without a hearth. It will either consume itself or find new fuel. The court buzzes with two competing futures. One is whispered by a tall, wild-eyed Genoese navigator named Cristobal Colon. He speaks of a westward passage to the Indies, of Cipango and Cathay, of gold and spices beyond imagining. He unrolls charts drawn from fancy and wishful thinking, his hands tracing routes across a vast, terrifying emptiness. He is a dreamer, a merchant of fantasies, and the court sees him as such. His talk is of profit, of a new kind of enterprise. It is a language many are not yet ready to speak. The other future is not whispered. It is preached. It thunders from the pulpits, and is spoken with grim certainty in the war councils. Its chief advocate is a man whose gaunt face seems carved from bone, Cardinal Francisco Jimenez de Cisneros. He is Isabella's confessor, a Franciscan ascetic whose personal austerity is matched only by the ferocity of his faith. He points not west into the abyss of the unknown, but south. South, across the narrow strait of water you can see from the Spanish hills on a clear day. South to the shores of Africa, the Maghreb. The Reconquista is not finished, he argues in the hushed halls of the newly consecrated palace chapel. His voice is not loud, but it has the density of a millstone. It is merely paused at the water's edge. Granada was not the heart of the beast, but a single tentacle. The heart lies in Fez, in Tlemcen, in Tunis, the very lands that once belonged to the Christian Visigoths, the land of St. Augustine himself, suffer under the yoke of the infidel. You feel the gravitational pull of his logic. It is an argument forged from 7 centuries of struggle. To these men and women, the world is a divine stage for a single cosmic drama, the battle between Christ and Muhammad. To stop now would be a theological absurdity, a military folly. The Barbary pirates, a constant menace to their coasts, are sponsored by the very emirs Cisneros speaks of. The final expulsion of the Jews and Muslims from Spain, an act already being prepared, will mean nothing if a hostile shore remains just a day's sail away, a potential beachhead for a counter-invasion, a new Reconquista in reverse. Columbus speaks of gold, Cisneros speaks of God and security. In the Spain of 1492, this is no contest. You are in the royal council chamber. The air is cold. Columbus has made his final, impassioned plea. He speaks of tides and winds, of the calculations of Toscanelli, of the glory of outflanking the Venetian and Ottoman stranglehold on the spice trade. Ferdinand listens, his chin resting on his hand, intrigued by the economic possibilities, but wary of the immense risk. It is a gamble, a shot in the darkest of nights. Then Cisneros speaks. He does not use charts. He uses the crucifix that hangs around his neck. Your majesties have been chosen by God as the instruments of his will. You have purified this land. Will you now leave the work half done? The veterans of Granada stand ready. The spirit of Santiago Matamoros, who has ridden with our armies, strains at the bit. To turn from this holy duty would be to squander the divine favour that has granted you this victory. He gestures to a grizzled captain of the Santa Hermandad, a man whose face is a roadmap of scars from the Granada campaign. Our men know how to fight the Moor. They know the heat, the dust, the tactics. They do not know the sea of monsters that this Genoese promises to cross. Send them where their skills are of use. Let us build a new rampart for Christendom, not on the shifting sands of a distant shore, but on the firm ground of Africa. Let us make the Mediterranean a Spanish lake. Isabella looks at Ferdinand. No words are exchanged, but a decision is made. You see it pass between them, an invisible current of shared conviction. The dream of a Western passage dies in the cold air of the chamber. It is a flicker of a future that will never be, extinguished by the immense, consuming fire of the present. The resources, the ships, the men, the royal treasury, and most importantly, the divine mandate will not be divided. They will be aimed like a lance at the heart of the old enemy. The Reconquista is not over. It is merely entering its final, most ambitious phase. The twist is not that Spain chooses conquest. The twist is that it chooses the one that makes the most sense. The invasion of the Americas, in hindsight, was a staggering, almost insane leap of faith. The invasion of the Maghreb is a brutal, cold, and calculated continuation of everything that has defined the Spanish identity for centuries. It is the path of least resistance. And so, the great pivot occurs. The shipyards of Cadiz and Palos do not build caravels for a voyage into the unknown West. They build galleys and heavy transports for a war across the strait. The hardened tercios, the finest infantry in Europe, are not decommissioned. They are re-equipped for a desert campaign. The fervour of holy war, instead of being sublimated into a quest for gold and distant lands, is honed to an even sharper edge. You find yourself on the docks of Tarifa. The summer of 1492 is not one of hopeful departure into mystery, but of a vast and brutal mobilization. The scale of it is staggering. This is not a tentative expedition. It is a full-scale migration of an army. Thousands of soldiers, horses, cannons, and priests assemble under the joint banners of Castile and Aragon. The ethical tension hangs heavy in the salt-laced air. This is not a war of discovery. It is a war of annihilation. The royal decrees are clear. The emirs of North Africa are to be overthrown, the land claimed for Spain, and the populace is to be converted to the true faith, or be put to the sword and chain. It is the Granada campaign on a continental scale. There is no pretense of trade or diplomacy. It is the final, bloody act of a centuries-long feud. You are on one of the lead ships as the Armada crosses the strait. The coast of Africa rises from the haze, a stark, tan line against the impossible blue of the sky. It looks arid, ancient, and unwelcoming. This is not the verdant paradise of a new world. It is the homeland of the old enemy. The men around you are not adventurers. They are executioners. They test the edges of their swords, their faces grim, their prayers muttered and fierce. The landing at Ceuta is barely opposed. The city is overwhelmed by the sheer size and shock of the invasion force. But as the army disembarks, stepping onto the hot, dusty soil of Africa, the nature of their undertaking becomes clear. The heat is a physical blow, a suffocating blanket woven of dust and shimmering air. The land stretches away, not green and fertile like Andalusia, but ochre, rock, and thorn. The local populations do not greet them as liberators from their emirs. They melt away into the hills, their eyes filled with a hatred that is ancient and profound. The Spanish flag, the red and gold of Aragon and Castile, is planted on the battlements of Ceuta's fortress. A Te Deum is sung. The victory is absolute. But as you look out from the walls, past the subjugated city and toward the vast, unknowable interior of the continent, you understand the truth. They have not conquered a kingdom. They have kicked open the door to a hornet's nest the size of a world. The war they thought they were finishing has just begun, and its demands will consume them utterly. The Iron Cross is now planted on Barbary shores, and its shadow will stretch across centuries, reshaping not only this forgotten continent, but the one its conquerors have just condemned to remain undiscovered. The scent of war is gone. You are in Lisbon now, and the air tastes of salt, not dust. This city does not look inward. To a continent it must conquer inch by bloody inch. It faces outward, its back to Europe, its gaze fixed on the infinite promise of the sea. The shipyards of the Tagus estuary ring with the sound of hammers on wood, a percussion of progress and ambition. Here, they are not building galleys for a brutal shuttle war across a strait. They are building deep-bellied caravels, ships designed to ride the deep ocean swells, to chase the horizon itself. It is 1494. The Spanish invasion of the Maghreb is in its second year, and the news that reaches Portugal is not of glory and gold, but of grinding attrition. Queen Isabella's armies have secured the coastline from Tangier to Oran, but the interior has swallowed them. The emirs have fallen back into the mountains and deserts, waging a fierce guerrilla war. Every Spanish garrison is an island in a hostile sea. The cost in blood and treasure is immense. Spain, the newly forged sword of Christendom, is being blunted against the anvil of Africa. For King John II of Portugal, this is not a problem. It is an unparalleled opportunity. While his Spanish rivals empty their treasury into the sands of the Maghreb, he is free to pursue the true prize, the sea route to the Indies. His captains, methodical and patient, have spent decades mapping the African coast, charting the winds and currents, planting their stone padroins on each new cape. They have rounded the Cape of Good Hope. They know the way is open. The wealth of the East is within their grasp. Into this court of pragmatic mariners walks a ghost. You see him, a man whose moment has passed, his dream curdled into obsession. Cristobal Colon, Christopher Columbus. He is older now, his hair whiter, the lines of frustration etched deeper around his eyes. He has come from the Spanish court, not as a celebrated admiral, but as a petitioner dismissed for a second and final time. His Enterprise of the Indies is a fantasy Spain can no longer afford. Every last Maravidi is being funneled into the African crusade. He stands before King John, unrolling the same charts, making the same arguments. He speaks of a westward passage, a shortcut to the spices of the Moluccas and the gold of Cipango. The Portuguese court listens with a polite, almost clinical, disinterest. Why would they gamble on a madman's theory when a certainty lies before them? Their route is proven, their ships are ready. Vasco da Gama is already being outfitted for the final, triumphant voyage to Calicut. Columbus's plea is no longer just a business proposition. It is a cry of desperation. He is a man watching history turn the wrong way. But to the Portuguese, he is an irrelevance. Their great rival is occupied, bogged down in a land war that promises little profit. The entire Atlantic, the vast, empty canvas of the West, is theirs by default. They have no competitor. Why race to a finish line when you are the only one on the track? King John dismisses him. It is a quiet, final nail in the coffin of the westward voyage. Columbus leaves the court a broken man. He will drift to France, then perhaps to England, but the moment has been lost. The sheer scale and urgency of Spain's African war has sucked all the speculative energy out of Europe. The continent's monarchs are watching the Maghreb, placing their bets on whether Spain will succeed or bleed itself dry. No one has the appetite for a second, even more audacious, gamble in a different direction. The unexpected twist is the silence. The world holds its breath. The Americas, teeming with millions, their empires rising and falling to the rhythm of their own cosmic clocks, remain shrouded in blissful, terrible ignorance. There is no Santa Maria running aground on Hispaniola. No smallpox will decimate the Taino. The Aztec Emperor, Ahuitzotl, continues his bloody wars of expansion, his priests clad in the flayed skins of his enemies, utterly unaware of the world beyond the water. In the Andes, the Inca Empire is consolidating its power, a marvel of engineering and social control, alone under its mountain gods. Their reprieve is an accident of history, a consequence of a Spanish decision made thousands of miles away. You are back in Seville, the port that in another world would be the gateway to the New World. Here, it is the logistical heart of the African war machine. The Guadalquivir River is choked with ships, but they do not carry treasure back from unknown lands. They carry supplies eastward: grain, wine, weapons, and fresh levies of soldiers. The ships that return carry the wounded, the sick, and the only true commodity the war produces in abundance: slaves. Berber captives, taken in raids, are paraded through the streets and sold in the same markets where, in another timeline, silver from Potosi would one day be traded. This is the ethical tension of this new world. The Americas have been spared for now, but the machine of conquest and exploitation has not been dismantled. It has simply been aimed at a different target. The moral compromise at the heart of colonialism is laid bare. It was never about a desire to explore. It was always about a desire to dominate. The faces of the enslaved are different, Amazai. Not Arawak. But the chains are the same. The justification is the same. They are infidels, spoils of a just war, their subjugation, a service to God. The culture of Spain is being shaped by this war. It is not becoming a culture of far-flung administrators and gold-hungry adventurers. It is becoming the culture of a permanent garrison state. The national identity is hardening around the ancient conflict with Islam. The heroes are not Cortés and Pizarro, conquerors of impossible empires. They are dour, pragmatic captains who know how to build a fort, manage a supply line, and put down a desert rebellion. The stories told are not of cities of gold, but of desperate sieges, of thirst, and of the slow, brutal work of pacifying a hostile land. The Atlantic reorientation, the monumental shift of the world's focus from the Mediterranean to the ocean, has been delayed indefinitely. Portugal pushes methodically around Africa, its empire one of trading posts and maritime dominance, not of continental conquest. England and France are minor players, their ambitions checked by a Europe still oriented on a north-south axis defined by the conflict between the Habsburgs and the Valois, and the overarching crusade in Africa. You stand on the coast of Portugal, looking west. The sun sets on an empty ocean. It is an ocean of myth and fear, not of opportunity. The great dialogue between the two halves of the world has not begun. The Columbian Exchange, the torrent of plants, animals, diseases, technologies, and ideas that would define our modern era, has not happened. The potato has not left the Andes. The horse has not reached the Great Plains. Syphilis has not reached Europe. And smallpox has not reached the Americas. The silence from the West is the defining feature of this new 16th century. History is holding its course, confined to the old continents, circling the familiar sea. But it is a fragile, temporary state. The knowledge is there. The ships exist. The ambition is merely dormant. You feel the immense, latent potential of that empty ocean. The world is a split orange, each half unaware of the other's existence, waiting for the single inevitable cut that will reveal the whole. But the knife is not in the hands of a Spanish conquistador. It is waiting for someone else, someone new, and when they finally come, they will find a world utterly different from the one we know. You are 20 leagues east of Oran, on a coastal plain that shimmers under a sun of hammered brass. The air is thick, syrupy with the smell of boiling sugarcane and the metallic tang of human sweat. This is not the Maghreb of the Zionid emirs. This is Nueva Castilla. The name itself is an act of erasure, a declaration that this ancient land of the Amazigh is now nothing more than an extension of the Iberian heartland, a property to be administered and exploited. Here, the Grand Crusade has cooled into the grim business of profit. The war of conquest is over. The war of production has begun. You stand on the veranda of a newly built hacienda, its whitewashed walls a painful glare in the afternoon light. This is the nerve centre of the Encomienda de San Miguel de la Costa, a vast tract of land granted to Captain Diego de Valdez, a veteran of the Granada campaign. The grant did not just give him the land, it gave him the people. Hundreds of Amazigh families, their villages now dependencies of his estate, are his to command, his to protect, and his to instruct in the articles of the Holy Faith. This system, the Encomienda, is the engine of Nueva Castilla. It was not invented here. It was perfected in the conquest of the Canary Islands a generation ago. There, the Spanish crown learned a vital lesson. Conquest is expensive, but a conquered population can be made to pay for its own subjugation. Faced with the immense, arid territory of the Maghreb, a land with no fabled cities of gold, no silver mountains, the model was not just an option, it was a necessity. Captain de Valdez joins you on the veranda. He is not the monster you might expect. He is a man in his 50s, his face burned dark by two suns, the Spanish and the African. He is pious, unyielding, and utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He does not see himself as a slaver. He sees himself as a patriarch, a Christian lord bringing civilization to a savage people. They are like children, he says, gesturing with his chin toward the fields below. Stubborn and prone to idolatry. But they learn. They learn the value of work. They learn the catechism. We are saving their souls, even if their bodies must be disciplined to accept God's grace. You look down at the fields. You see the children he speaks of. Men and women, their backs bent, cutting the thick stalks of sugarcane under the watchful eyes of armed overseers. Their movements are slow, exhausted. This is not the seasonal rhythm of subsistence farming they once knew. This is the relentless, industrial pace of a cash crop economy. The sugar they produce will be shipped to Seville, sold in Antwerp and Genoa, and sweeten the cups of a Europe that will never know the bitterness of its cultivation. Beside the sugar fields are vast tracts of wheat, a golden ocean flowing up to the foothills of the Atlas. This wheat does not feed the people who grow it. It feeds the Spanish garrisons in Fez and Tlemcen and the burgeoning cities back in Andalusia. Nueva Castilla is being remade into Spain's breadbasket and sugar bowl, a transformation paid for with the currency of human freedom. The conversion is as brutal and systematic as the labor. You have seen it. A makeshift chapel, a weary priest reciting the Nicene Creed in a language the captive congregation does not understand. Baptism is a mass-produced ritual, a sprinkling of holy water that washes away a culture but not the resentment in the people's hearts. They are now Moriscos, a new and ever-growing class of subjects. Officially Christian, but suspect, untrusted, and bound to the land. Their mosques have been torn down or converted into churches, the call of the muezzin replaced by the clang of the mission bell. The ethical tension of this place is a constant, suffocating pressure. The Spanish are following the letter of their own law. Before each new territory in the interior is pacified, a herald reads the Requerimiento, a document of astonishing legalistic arrogance. It explains the history of the world from Adam and Eve, establishes the authority of the Pope, and demands the listeners submit to the Spanish crown and the Christian faith. The fact that it is read in Castilian to people who speak only Tamazight or Arabic is irrelevant. Once it is read, their choice is submission or a just war. Their enslavement is therefore legally unimpeachable in the eyes of their conquerors. But the system, born of ruthless efficiency, contains the seeds of its own crisis. This is the unexpected twist. The indigenous population is not an infinite resource. They are dying, not in the dramatic slaughters of open battle, but in a slow, grinding attrition. European diseases, the pox and the bloody flux, move through the crowded labour barracks. The unfamiliar, back-breaking labour of the sugar plantations exhausts them. Their birth rates plummet as families are broken apart. Captain de Valdez complains of it. The workforce is weak, he grumbles, looking at the setting Sunday. We lose too many each season. They do not have the constitution for proper work. The problem is not unique to his encomienda. It is happening across the coastal plains of Nueva Castilla. The Spanish have created a machine that is consuming its own fuel. The demand for sugar and wheat is insatiable. The supply of local labour is finite. A lone voice of protest exists, a parallel to the Bartolomé de las Casas of another timeline. A Franciscan friar named Brother Alonso de Segura writes frantic letters to Cardinal Cisneros in Toledo. He details the abuses, the deaths, the hypocrisy of saving souls by destroying bodies. He argues that the Amazigh are free men with natural rights, not chattel. But his letters are filed away, his pleas lost in the grander strategic and economic concerns of the empire. The African crusade needs to be profitable, and the encomiendas are the only thing making it so. Brother Alonso is a whisper in a hurricane. The real solution to the labour problem is not compassion. It is a new, colder calculation. Spanish eyes are beginning to turn further south. For centuries, the caravans of the Sahara have brought gold, salt, and ivory to the Maghreb. But they have also brought another commodity: black slaves from the kingdoms of the Sahel. The trade has existed for centuries, a steady trickle of human beings across the desert. Now, as you stand on this veranda, you overhear the new conversations. The captains and administrators speak of organizing this trade, of rationalizing it, of redirecting it to the coastal plantations. Why exhaust themselves trying to civilize the defiant local Berbers when a vast, untapped source of labor exists beyond the desert? This is the next logical step. The brutal plantation economy of Nueva Castilla is creating a vacuum, a desperate hunger for bodies that will soon pull on the threads of the trans-Saharan slave trade, not as a trickle, but as a torrent. You look at the sea. the great blue expanse of the Mediterranean. It is a sea of saints and slaves. On one shore, men like Cisneros and de Valdez build a Christian empire, convinced of their divine mandate. On the other, and from the south, a new, even darker chapter is about to be written as the Spanish realize that to sustain their new creation, they must not just conquer a people, but commandeer the soul of a continent. You are in Constantinople, the city the world still calls by its old name, the city that is the eye of the storm. It is 1514. From the high windows of the Topkapi Palace, you can see the Bosphorus, a slash of sapphire dividing two continents, a waterway teeming with the commerce and warships of our ascendant empire. This is the capital of the House of Osman, the seat of a power that has humbled the Christian kingdoms of the Balkans and shattered the walls of Byzantium. Yet, for all its splendor, the mood within the divan, the imperial council, is one of grim fury. The Sultan, Selim I, presides. He is not a man of easy comfort or grand display. They call him Yavuz, the stern, and the name is an understatement. His face is lean, his beard trimmed short, and his eyes burn with a restless, messianic energy. He is a man who made himself sultan through civil war, a ruler who would execute his own brothers to secure his throne. He understands power not as a birthright, but as a thing to be seized and wielded without hesitation. For years the reports have come, carried on Venetian galleys and by spies from the east. They speak of the unthinkable. The Spanish, the Christian fanatics who purged Al-Andalus, have not stopped at the sea. They have crossed it. They have established a province, a Christian emirate, on the shores of Africa. They call it Nueva Castilla. Oran, Algiers, Tunis, the great ports of the Barbary coast, that should have been stepping stones for Islamic power into the heart of the Mediterranean, are now fortresses of the cross. To the Ottoman court, this is a humiliation of the highest order. It is a strategic disaster and a theological abomination. The Western Gate is slammed shut. Any dream of supporting a Muslim reconquest of Spain, of projecting Ottoman naval power toward the Straits of Gibraltar, is now a fantasy. The Spanish are entrenched, their legions hardened by decades of war, their coastline a string of interlocking fortresses. To challenge them, there would be to assault a wall of stone and steel, a costly, grinding war with no clear prize. You watch the debate unfold in the council. The Grand Admiral, his robes smelling of the sea, speaks of the Spanish galleys, of their cannon, of the sheer logistical madness of trying to supply an invasion force so far from the heart of the empire. He speaks with the caution of a man who knows the realities of wind and water. Then the generals of the army speak. They are men of the land, commanders of the Janissaries and the Sipahi cavalry. Their world is not the fickle sea, but the vast expanse of Anatolia, the plains of Mesopotamia, the mountains of Persia. They point east. Their arguments are sharp, logical, and brutal. The Christian threat in the West, they contend, is a contained one. Spain is bleeding its strength into the African sands, bogged down in a permanent colonial war. The true threats to the glory of the Ottoman state and the purity of Sunni Islam lie elsewhere. To the south, the decaying Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt holds the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, yet they are too weak to defend them. They are a prize waiting to be taken. And to the east, a greater peril looms. Shah Ismail, the red-haired, charismatic leader of the Safavid dynasty, has united Persia under the banner of Shia Islam. He calls himself a living saint, a descendant of Ali, and his fanatical Qizilbash warriors have carved out a powerful new empire. To Selim and the Sunni ulema of Constantinople, this is not just a rival kingdom, it is a cancerous heresy. Ismail's preachers are active in eastern Anatolia, spreading their faith, undermining Ottoman authority, threatening to split the Islamic world in two. Selim listens, his face a mask. There is no real choice here. The humiliation in the Maghreb must be answered not by a futile war against an entrenched Christian power, but by a spectacular demonstration of Ottoman supremacy over the world of Islam itself. If the Spanish have declared themselves the sword of the Catholic Church, then Selim will become the undisputed hammer of Sunni orthodoxy. He will forge a unified Islamic front by crushing all who stand in his way. The mission is clear. First, consolidate the heartland. Then, eradicate the heresy. The westward gaze of the Ottoman Empire snaps eastward with terrifying speed and decisiveness. The first blow falls on the Mamluks. It is not a war. It is an execution. At the Battle of Marj de Beek in 1516, and again at Ridaniah in 1517, the Ottoman war machine annihilates the Mamluk cavalry. The Mamluks fight with the valour of a bygone age, with lance and scimitar. The Ottomans fight with disciplined ranks of janissaries armed with muskets and supported by the most fearsome artillery train in the world. Egypt, Syria, Palestine, and the Hejaz fall. Selim enters Cairo not as a conqueror, but as a liberator from a decadent regime. He takes the title Servant of the Two Holy Mosques, and, more importantly, becomes the undisputed Caliph of Sunni Islam. The symbolic power is immense. The loss of the Maghreb is now reframed. A minor limb has been amputated, but the heart of Islam now beats in an Ottoman chest. But this is merely the prelude. The true target is Persia. The war against the Safavids becomes the central obsession of Selim's reign. He issues a declaration of war that is also a theological treatise, condemning Shah Ismail and his followers as apostates worthy of death. This is not a war for territory. It is a war of extermination. You are with the Ottoman army as it marches east in the summer of 1514. It is a river of men and steel flowing across the plains of Anatolia. You see the janissaries, their pale faces impassive, their muskets oiled and ready. You feel the ground shake as the great bronze cannons, each pulled by a dozen oxen, are dragged toward the frontier. The logistics are a miracle of imperial organization. The enemy is a ghost, retreating before them, scorching the earth, poisoning the wells. The two armies finally meet at Chaldiran. The Safavid army is a blaze of colour and fervour. The Kizilbash cavalry with their distinctive red hats, convinced of their Shah's divine protection. They charge with religious ecstasy, a wave of horsemen that has been invincible for a generation. They break upon the Ottoman line like water on a rock. The janissaries, chained together at the ankles to prevent any thought of retreat, unleash volley after volley of musket fire. The Ottoman cannons scythe through the charging cavalry, turning valour into a bloody pulp. It is a slaughter. It is the victory of modern, organised warfare over charismatic fanaticism. Shah Ismail is wounded and flees the field, his aura of invincibility shattered. The Ottomans win the day, but the victory is not total. The vastness of Persia and the onset of winter prevent a complete conquest. This is the unexpected twist. The sheer intensity of the Ottoman onslaught does not destroy the Safavid state. It forges it. The existential threat from the Sunni superpower to the west forces the Persian state to fuse its identity completely with Shia Islam. Shi'ism becomes more than a faith. It is the bedrock of national resistance, the one thing that distinguishes them from their Turkish enemy. The schism between Sunni and Shia, which had been one of many fissures in the Islamic world, now becomes a vast, unbridgeable canyon filled with blood. By attempting to unify Islam through force, Selim ensures it will be forever divided. The ethical tension is profound. The Ottoman Empire, in response to a Christian holy war in the West, launches its own holy war in the East. They posture as the defenders of Islam while unleashing a wave of sectarian slaughter upon fellow Muslims that dwarfs the violence of the Spanish in Africa. The definition of infidel narrows to include not just the Christian but the heretic, who prays to the same God but in a different manner. You stand once more in Constantinople, now under Selim's son, Suleiman the Magnificent. The western door remains closed. The Mediterranean is a divided sea. Its western half is a Spanish battleground, a zone of Christian-Berber conflict. Its eastern half is an Ottoman lake, the platform from which Suleiman will continue his father's endless war against Persia and project power into the Indian Ocean. The two great empires of the age stand back to back, consumed by their own holy wars. One against the cross, the other against the crescent's own shadow. They have partitioned the world, and in doing so, created a new geography of conflict that will shape the destiny of nations for centuries to come. You are in the high passes of the Atlas Mountains, where the air is thin and carries the scent of juniper and ancient stones. It is 1,570, nearly 80 years since the first Spanish landings at Ceuta. The sun, a brutal eye in the sky, glares down on a landscape of stark beauty and ancient defiance. Here, in the heart of the pacified Maghreb, the Spanish cross does not cast the long shadow of absolute authority. Instead, it breeds a strange, thorny hybrid, a religion born of conquest and resilience. You walk through a small mountain village, a cluster of mud brick houses clinging to a steep slope. The familiar call of the muezzin is gone, replaced by the faint, irregular peal of a bell from a crude stone chapel. This is a village of Moriscos, as the Spanish call them, officially Christian converts. But the Christianity you find here is something utterly unique, something that would send shivers of horror down the spine of any inquisitor in Toledo. The village elder, a man named Omar, who now calls himself Mateo, guides you. He speaks in a fractured Castilian, but his eyes, ancient and knowing, convey a depth of understanding that transcends language. He takes you into the chapel. On the altar, beside a rough wooden crucifix, stands a statue of a figure with a long beard and a staff, dressed in rough desert robes. It is clearly John the Baptist, but the villagers venerate him as a desert prophet, a figure of purification and righteous anger, a sort of Christianized analogue to their own Islamic saints and Sufi holy men. He taught us to live as God intended, Mateo explains, his voice low and reverent, to be clean, to be strong, to wait for the true light. The true light they await is not quite the Christ of the Gospels. In these mountains, Jesus is not primarily the gentle shepherd or the suffering redeemer. He is Isa al-Muharib, Jesus the warrior. He is a fierce, ascetic figure who walked the desert, battling demons and false prophets, much like a Sufi warrior, saint. His miracles are not just healing the sick, but providing sustenance in the desert, finding water where there is none, defending his followers from marauders. The Eucharist, the central sacrament of Catholicism, is performed, but often with water and unleavened bread, symbolizing the simplicity of the desert and a puritanical rejection of the Spanish Church's elaborate rituals. This is the heresy of the Sun-Scorched Christ. It is a syncretic faith born of necessity and cultural inertia. The Spanish conquered the land, destroyed the mosques, and forced conversions. But they could not conquer the human spirit, nor could they completely erase centuries of deeply ingrained cultural and religious practice. The Amazigh, a people whose identity was forged in resistance, took the imposed religion and warped it, bending it to their own spiritual landscape. They overlaid Catholic dogma with pre-Islamic animism, the reverence for natural spirits and ancient places. They infused it with Sufi mysticism, the deep, personal connection to the divine, the ecstatic trances, the veneration of local holy men. The unexpected twist is the role of the Spanish Inquisition itself. It is a shadow, a constant threat, but its efforts are ultimately self-defeating. The Inquisition is brutal. Its tribunals are active in the major cities Oran, Fez, Marrakesh. They burn heretics, torture suspected crypto-Muslims, and issue endless edicts against impure practices. But the sheer scale of the population, the vastness and inaccessibility of the Atlas Mountains, and the deep-seated resistance of the Amazigh make a total purification impossible. Each auto de fe, each public burning of a heretic, simply drives the syncretic faith deeper underground, hardening its adherents' resolve. The Inquisition, in its blind pursuit of absolute doctrinal purity, inadvertently creates a more resilient, secretive, and ultimately more dangerous spiritual resistance. The ethical tension here is agonizing. The Spanish genuinely believe they are saving souls. They are bringing what they see as the one true path to a people they consider lost in paganism and infidel error. Their actions, however brutal, are justified by this unwavering conviction. Yet, their methods forced conversion, cultural annihilation, the denial of basic human dignity lead not to salvation, but to a profound perversion of the faith they seek to impose. They are sowing the seeds of rebellion, not spiritual enlightenment. The Moriscos are not converting. They are adapting, dissimulating, and secretly nurturing a faith that is both Christian and defiantly not Spanish. You witness a baptism in the village. A Spanish priest, weary and frustrated, sprinkles water on a newborn. He recites the Latin formulas, his voice echoing oddly in the small chapel. The parents nod, their faces impassive. But later that night, by the light of a hidden oil lamp, Mateo, the elder, performs a different rite. He smears the baby's forehead with a paste made of local herbs, chanting ancient Amazigh blessings, invoking the spirits of the mountains and the ancestors. The child has been initiated into two worlds, two faiths, but its true allegiance, you sense, will belong to the one that honors its land and its people. The language itself is transforming. Castilian words are absorbed, distorted, and repurposed. The villagers learn the Lord's Prayer, but they intersperse it with phrases from their own tongue, creating a liturgy that is incomprehensible to outsiders. Sacred texts, translated by secret scholars into local dialects, are passed hand to hand, containing interpretations of the Gospels that align with Amazigh cosmology. This cultural inertia is a powerful force. It is not a sudden violent eruption of rebellion yet, but a slow geological shift. The Spanish sought to create a mirror image of themselves in Africa, to extend Castile across the strait. But instead, they have created a distorted reflection, a funhouse mirror that shows them a twisted version of their own faith, a defiant synthesis that threatens to explode from within. The longer the Spanish rule, the deeper this hybrid faith takes root, becoming a shield against assimilation, a secret language of resistance. You leave the mountains, descending back to the sun-baked plains, to the encomiendas and garrisons. You see the Spanish officers, content in their belief that the conversions are taking hold, that their work is successful. They see the outward conformity. They do not see the defiant heart, the syncretic soul, the sun-scorched Christ, being forged in the hidden valleys and caves. They believe they have planted the cross. They do not realize that what has grown is a monstrous, beautiful, dangerous bloom that will one day challenge their very presence on this continent. The heresy of the mountains is a slow-burning fuse, waiting for the right spark to ignite a different kind of holy war. You are in a wood-panelled room in Augsburg, a city built on finance, where the clink of coins is more persuasive than the clash of swords. The air is heavy with the scent of beeswax and old paper. Across a massive oak table sits Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. He is not yet 30, but he has the weariness of a man twice his age. He is the heir to 4 dynasties, the ruler of an empire on which the sun, it is said, never sets. His titles are a litany of power: King of Spain, Archduke of Austria, Lord of the Netherlands, Duke of Burgundy, King of the Romans. On paper, he is the most powerful man since Charlemagne. But in this room he is not an emperor. He is a debtor. Facing him is Jakob Fugger, known as the Rich. The title is an understatement. Fugger is a merchant, a miner, a banker. His family's financial network is the true nervous system of Europe. He is a man whose plain woolen clothes are a deliberate counterpoint to the emperor's velvet and ermine. Fugger's power does not come from God or bloodline. It comes from the cold, hard numbers written in the ledgers that his clerks now spread across the table. You watch as the banker's index finger, ink-stained and blunt, traces a line of figures. He speaks in a calm, level tone, the voice of a man explaining an immutable law of nature. Your Majesty, the revenues from Nueva Castilla are steady. The sugar tariffs from Oran are up this quarter. The wheat shipments to Seville provide a reliable, if modest, income. The sale of Berber captives in the Lisbon and Valencia markets adds a predictable sum. The words are a death sentence. Steady, modest, predictable. These are the words of agriculture, of trade, of a colonial economy built on land and forced labour. They are not the words of empire. An empire that must fight on 3 fronts against the French in Italy, against the Ottoman Turks in the Mediterranean, and against a rising tide of heresy within Germany itself, cannot be run on the profits of sugar and wheat. In another world, a different report would be arriving. Ships, heavy in the water, would be docking in Seville, their holds overflowing with silver bars from the mines of Zacatecas and gold artifacts stripped from the temples of the Aztec. A torrent of bullion, a river of specie, would be flooding the Habsburg treasury, allowing the emperor to hire mercenaries, bribe electors, and fund his armies without limit. That Charles V would be a man who could afford his principles. This Charles V cannot. The numbers on Fugger's ledger tell the story. The cost of maintaining the garrisons in the Maghreb is a constant drain. The war in Italy against Francis I of France is a financial black hole. And now there is the matter of the German princes. The Lutherans, Fugger says, his tone shifting from accounting to political reality. The Schmalkaldic League, they refuse to pay the imperial war tax, unless their religious freedoms are guaranteed. They are raising their own armies, fortified by their faith and, more importantly, by the church lands they have seized. You see the muscle tighten in Charles's jaw. He is a man of profound, almost severe Catholic piety. The idea of Martin Luther, the loud, defiant monk, is a personal affront, a challenge to his God and his authority. He is the Holy Roman Emperor. His sacred duty is to crush this heresy and restore the unity of the Church. But the army he would need to march into Saxony and Hesse does not exist. The mercenaries are demanding back pay. His Spanish tercios, the best infantry in the world, are bogged down in Africa, putting down yet another uprising in the Atlas foothills. This is the Golden Cage. Charles is trapped. He possesses the grandest titles in Christendom, but his treasury is bare. He is the anointed defender of the faith, but he is forced to negotiate with heretics. He is surrounded by enemies, each demanding his full attention, while his resources allow him to fight only one of them, and then only badly. His empire is a magnificent, sprawling tapestry, but the golden threads that should hold it together are missing. Francis I of France knows this. The French king, Charles's great rival, fights with a newfound confidence. He is not facing a behemoth funded by the wealth of a new world. He is facing a desperate, overstretched foe. The wars in Italy are no longer a foregone conclusion. They are a grinding, attritional struggle where victory goes to the side that can keep its army in the field a month longer than the other. The ethical tension is etched on the emperor's face. To be who he is supposed to be, the strong arm of the church, he must do the one thing he cannot afford to do. To keep his empire from collapsing, he must make a deal with the devil. He must sacrifice his most sacred duty on the altar of fiscal reality. And so, the unexpected twist, the monumental pivot, occurs not on a battlefield, but in a quiet room like this one. Charles makes his decision. It is not a choice. It is a capitulation to circumstance. The war against the Lutherans will not be fought. It cannot be. At the next imperial diet, held in Speyer, Charles V does the unthinkable. In exchange for the full payment of imperial taxes and military support from the German princes against France, he grants them what amounts to permanent religious autonomy. The Edict of Worms is effectively dead. The principle of cuius regio, eius religio, whose realm, his religion is not a weary compromise reached after 30 years of devastating war. It becomes the law of the empire. In the 1,530 seconds, a pragmatic bargain born of bankruptcy. The Reformation is saved, not by theological brilliance or popular fervour alone, but by the poverty of its greatest enemy. The schism in Western Christendom is rendered permanent, not by a clash of armies, but by a banker's ledger. The horrific religious wars that would tear Central Europe apart for a century, most notably the 30 Years' War, are averted. Germany is spared, that apocalypse of fire and sword, but the cost is the dream of a unified Catholic Europe. That dream dies here, in a quiet room in Augsburg. You look at Charles. He is a man watching his own destiny crumble. He had envisioned a universal monarchy, a new Roman Empire, united under one God and one emperor. Instead, he presides over its managed decline. He is a warden, not a conqueror. His great African crusade, the very act that was meant to be the crowning glory of the Reconquista, has become a millstone around his neck, draining the wealth that would have allowed him to be the emperor he was born to be. He signs the new loan agreement with Fugger. The terms are ruinous. He is mortgaging his future and the future of his dynasty just to keep his armies from mutinying for another season. He is a sovereign who is no longer sovereign over his own finances. The golden cage is locked. The key is in the hands of his bankers. He will spend the rest of his reign rattling the bars, fighting a desperate holding action against the forces of history, a giant chained by the mundane realities of profit and loss. When he finally abdicates and retreats to a monastery, it will not be just an act of weariness. It will be an act of surrender. You are breathing the air of a different kind of empire. You are in Lisbon, at the mouth of the Tagus River, where the fresh water of the land mingles with the salt of the boundless ocean. The year is 1521, and this city is the axis upon which the entire world now turns. Seville, its Spanish counterpart, is a city of soldiers and functionaries, its port dedicated to the grim, grinding business of an African war. Lisbon is a kaleidoscope of global commerce. The air itself is a commodity, thick with the scent of cloves from the Moluccas, pepper from the Malabar coast, cinnamon from Ceylon, and the sweet, cloying smell of sugar from the island of Madeira. On the docks you hear a dozen languages. Gujarati merchants haggle with Flemish bankers. German armourers inspect cannons destined for a fortress in Hormuz. Japanese slaves, the first of their kind to reach Europe, stand bewildered beside ebony-skinned Africans from the Kingdom of Congo. This is not the capital of a nation. It is the headquarters of a global enterprise. And its king, Manuel I, the Fortunate, is its chief executive officer. In the Torre de Belém, the newly constructed fortress that guards the entrance to the harbour, you see the physical manifestation of Portugal's soul. It is a work of impossible, exuberant detail. A fortress that looks like a jewel box. Its stonework is carved with coils of rope, armillary spheres, and the cross of the Order of Christ. It is a monument not to a grim land-based holy war, but to a triumphant sea-borne one. It does not look inward at a conquered enemy. It looks outward to an ocean that it, and it alone, now owns. With Spain shackled to its brutal, all-consuming conquest of the Maghreb, Portugal has faced no European rival in the great Oceanic game. The Treaty of Tordesillas, that imaginary line that once divided the world between two Iberian powers, is a forgotten footnote. Why would Portugal, the sole player on the field, agree to divide its winnings? There is no Spanish fleet sailing west to challenge its claims. There is no flow of Spanish silver to compete with its monopoly. The Atlantic, and by extension the world's oceans, belong to the House of Aviz. The result is an empire of breathtaking efficiency and unparalleled wealth. In another world, Portugal's hold on the spice trade would be a brilliant but brief chapter, soon challenged by the Spanish, the Dutch, the English. In this world, it is an absolute and suffocating monopoly. The Casa de India, Portugal's colonial trading house, is the most powerful economic entity on the planet, dwarfing the Fuggers and the Medicis. Its armadas, the Carrera de India, are not just merchant fleets. They are instruments of state policy. The Portuguese method is not the Spanish method. They are not attempting to conquer and convert vast land empires. That is a fool's errand, a costly mire that has swallowed their rivals whole. Theirs is a thalassocracy, an empire of the sea. They do not seize continents. They seize the choke points. Goa in India, Malacca in the strait between Sumatra and Malaysia, Hormuz at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, Sofala in East Africa. From these fortified ports, they act not as rulers but as gatekeepers. The ethical tension of this empire is colder, more calculated than Spain's righteous fury. It is the morality of the ledger book. Any ship that is not Portuguese found trading in the Indian Ocean is considered a pirate and is to be sunk on sight, its crew executed. Local merchants who wish to continue their ancient trade routes must purchase a license, a cartaz, from the local Portuguese governor. It is a protection racket on a global scale. They have not come to save souls. They have come to collect tariffs. Their violence is not the hot-blooded zeal of the crusader. It is the dispassionate, systematic violence of the enforcer. You have seen the reports from captains like Afonso de Albuquerque. They are stark and brutal. Cities that resist are bombarded into submission. Captured enemy combatants have their right hands, noses, and ears cut off before being released as a warning to others. It is terror, but a rationalized, economically motivated terror. The unexpected twist is what this torrent of wealth does to Portugal itself. The wealth is so vast, so easy, that it smothers the nation. with the spice monopoly pouring unimaginable sums into the royal treasury, there is no incentive to develop domestic industry. Why invest in weaving woolen cloth in Porto when you can buy the finest silks from China with a shipload of pepper that cost you almost nothing? Why improve farming techniques in the Alentejo when you can buy grain from Sicily or France with the stroke of a pen? Portugal becomes a nation of sailors, soldiers, priests, and royal administrators, but the productive heart of the country withers. The immense wealth flows through Lisbon and out again, into the hands of foreign bankers and manufacturers who supply the goods that Portugal no longer makes for itself. It is a new kind of golden cage, a gilded dependency. The nation is fabulously rich, but it is also becoming structurally hollow, its fate tied entirely to the fragile sea lanes that connect it to the east. And then there is the west, Brazil. In our timeline, it was a secondary concern for decades. Here, it is a vast, private estate. With no Spanish or French threats, the Portuguese can develop it at their leisure. The first profitable export is not gold, but pau-Brazil, the Brazil wood that produces a valuable red dye. But the real future is visible on the Atlantic islands of Madeira and the Azores. Sugar. Slowly, methodically, the Portuguese crown grants huge coastal captaincies to noblemen. The technology of the sugar plantation, perfected in the Atlantic islands, is imported wholesale, and with it comes the insatiable demand for labour. The local Tupi people prove difficult to enslave. They know the land and can melt into the vast interior. But the Portuguese have a solution ready-made from their long-standing trade relationships in Africa. From their forts at Elmina and Luanda, they begin to organize the slave trade on an industrial scale. This is not the northward trickle across the Sahara that the Spanish are beginning to exploit for Nueva Castilla. This is a seaborne Holocaust, the Middle Passage, organized with the same ruthless efficiency as the spice trade. An immense triangular trade route emerges. European goods to Africa, enslaved Africans to Brazil, and sugar from Brazil to Lisbon. You stand on a hill overlooking the Bay of All Saints, the future site of the city of Salvador. You see the beginnings of a new world, a society built from the ground up on the twin pillars of sugar and slavery. It is a world unchallenged, a Portuguese monopoly of human suffering. It is a slow, deliberate construction, not a mad dash for gold. The world of 1521 is a Portuguese world. Its maps are drawn in Lisbon. Its prices are set in Lisbon. Its morality is the morality of the bottom line. They have achieved a global dominance that is subtle, profound, and built on a foundation of absolute maritime supremacy. They did not need to discover a new world. They simply took control of the old one, and in their unchallenged success, they are planting the seeds of their own unique and spectacular decay. You are standing on the Riva degli Schiavoni in Venice, the stone embankment that is the city's grand reception hall. The year is 1505. The air is a humid concoction of brine, canal muck, and the distant, exotic scent of spices from the Rialto markets. This city is a miracle of defiance. A republic built on water. Its power derived not from land, but from its peerless mastery of ships and secrets. It is a city accustomed to foreigners. Its Fondaco dei Tedeschi bustles with German merchants. Its streets are filled with Greek sailors and Armenian traders. But the people you are watching disembark from a Genoese carrack are different. They are not merchants arriving with goods to sell. They are a people arriving with only what they could carry. They are the ghosts of a lost kingdom. You see them clearly. Families clustered together. The men with trimmed beards and tired, intelligent eyes. The women veiled, their expressions guarded. Their clothing is finer than that of other refugees, hinting at a past of wealth and status. They speak a soft, sibilant Castilian, yet they are not Spanish. They are the Andalusians the last children of Granada, cast out upon the sea. In another world, their journey would have been short. They would have crossed the 9 miles of water to the Maghreb to find refuge among their co-religionists in Fez or Tlemcen, their skills and learning welcomed into a familiar Islamic civilization. But in this world, that path does not exist. The Maghreb is now Nueva Castilla, a Christian war zone where the Inquisition sharpens its tools and the cross is planted with the sword. To flee there is to exchange one fire for another. And so they scattered. Like a glass shattered on a stone floor, the brilliant, complex society of Al-Andalus has been broken into 1,000 pieces, and those pieces now glitter in the most unexpected corners of the world. Some found their way to the great embrace of the Ottoman Sultan in Constantinople. But many, especially those with deep roots in trade and scholarship, sought harbour in the one place where utility could sometimes outweigh piety. Italy. You follow a family through the labyrinthine streets of Venice to the place the city has designated for them. It is a small, walled-off section of the Cannaregio district, the site of an old iron foundry, a ghetto. This is the real-world anchor of their new lives, a term that will one day become infamous. Here, the Jews of Al-Andalus, the Sephardim, are allowed to live, locked in at night, their freedom circumscribed. But within these walls, they are allowed to practice their faith and, more importantly, their professions. Nearby, in a less formalized but equally segregated quarter, their Muslim counterparts, the Granadan Moors, find a similar, precarious welcome. The ethical tension is palpable. The Venetian Republic is not a haven of tolerance. It is a machine of commerce. It has accepted these exiles not out of compassion, but out of a cold calculation of their worth. And their worth is immense. You enter the workshop of a man named Benveniste, a name he uses with Christians. Among his own, he is Baruch. He was a silk weaver in Granada, his family masters of a craft that was the envy of Europe. Now, in a damp Venetian workshop, he is setting up his looms. The Serenissimo's own silk industry is good, but it is not this. He knows techniques of brocading, of weaving with gold and silver thread that are secrets of his people. The Doge knows that with 100 men like Baruch, Venice can dominate the luxury textile market for a century. So Baruch is protected, not as a man, but as an asset. In another part of the ghetto, you sit in the consulting room of a physician, a Muslim named Yusuf al-Khatib, a wealthy Venetian merchant, suffering from a malady that has baffled the city's Christian doctors, has come to him as a last resort. Yusuf does not speak of humours and astrology. He takes the merchant's pulse, examines his eyes, asks sharp, specific questions about his diet and habits. He consults a book, its pages filled with elegant Arabic script. It is the Canon of Medicine by Avicenna. The knowledge contained within it, a synthesis of Greek and Islamic medical learning, is a revelation. Yusuf prescribes a change in diet and a specific herbal tincture. He will save the merchant's life, and in doing so, he will secure his own fragile place in this city. He is useful, therefore he is permitted to exist. This is the pattern, repeated across Italy. In Ferrara, the Duke d'Este welcomes Jewish financiers whose connections and capital help him fund his court and his armies. In Florence, exiled Moorish artisans influence the leatherwork and ceramics of the Medici-era workshops. But the most profound impact, the unexpected twist, is not on commerce. It is on the mind of Europe itself. You travel to the University of Padua, a jewel of the Venetian Republic, already one of the great centres of European humanism. The Renaissance is in full bloom, a passionate quest to recover the lost knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome. But the arrival of the Andalusian scholars changes the very nature of that quest. They did not come empty-handed. They brought libraries, not just religious texts, but meticulously preserved and annotated translations of Aristotle, Plato, Galen, and Euclid. Crucially, they brought with them the great commentaries of Islamic and Jewish thinkers, Averroes, who had wrestled with Aristotle's meaning a century before it became a Christian obsession, Maimonides, who had reconciled faith and reason, Alhazen, whose work on optics would form the foundation of a new science of light. In a lecture hall, you witness a debate. A traditional scholastic professor quotes the Latin Aristotle, his arguments circular and dense. He is challenged by a young humanist who has been studying with one of the exiled scholars. This humanist does not just quote Aristotle. He quotes Averroes's interpretation of Aristotle. He brings a new logic, a new skepticism, a new analytical rigor to the text. The Renaissance, which had been in danger of becoming a purely literary and artistic movement, is suddenly infused with a powerful new dose of science and philosophy. The focus shifts from merely admiring the ancients to actively engaging with and building upon their work, using the intellectual tools forged in Cordoba and Granada. Spain's great act of purification has backfired in the most spectacular and ironic way imaginable. In its attempt to create a homogeneous, purely Catholic state, it has performed a radical act of intellectual and economic surgery upon itself, cutting out some of its most productive and innovative citizens. It has then taken this excised tissue, this living culture of artisans, doctors, financiers, and scholars, and has inadvertently transplanted it into the heart of its European rivals. The cultural blooms are not just in Italy. In the burgeoning port of Antwerp, Sephardic merchants establish new trade routes, bringing a sophistication to the commercial life of the Low Countries that will lay the groundwork for a future golden age. In Salonika, under the protection of the Ottoman Sultan, Jewish exiles build one of the most vibrant intellectual and commercial centers in the entire Mediterranean. The Al-Andalus of Iberia is dead, but its spirit has not vanished. It has undergone a metamorphosis, a diaspora that has seeded its genius across the continent. Spain intended to cleanse itself of a foreign body. Instead, it has given its enemies and rivals a massive, unearned inheritance of knowledge, skill, and capital. The light of Granada was not extinguished. It was merely shattered, and its fragments now illuminate the very world that sought its destruction. You are in Salamanca, the intellectual furnace of the Spanish Empire. It is 1585. The city's ancient university, a magnificent creation of golden sandstone, has been the home of theologians and jurists for centuries. Here, men have debated the nature of the Holy Trinity and the soul of man, their arguments rooted in the eternal verities of Scripture and the rediscovered logic of Aristotle. But you are not in those hallowed halls. You are in a new wing of the university library, a place that smells not of old parchment and incense, but of dust, pressed flowers, and the sharp, unfamiliar ink used to draw maps. This is the Estudio de las Cosas de Africa, the Center for African Affairs. It is the most vital, best funded, and most pragmatic intellectual project in the entire Habsburg domain. The scientific revolution is happening here, in this room, but it carries no telescope and does not gaze at the stars. Its gaze is fixed firmly, ruthlessly, on the earth. At a large table, surrounded by stacks of books and scrolls, sits Fray Benito de la Cruz. He is a Franciscan, like the great Cardinal Cisneros, who first set Spain on this path. But he is a new kind of churchman. His piety is expressed not through theological speculation, but through a ferocious, all-consuming quest for practical knowledge. He is compiling the Historia Natural y Moral de Nueva Castilla, a monumental work intended to be the definitive guide to Spain's African domain. It is an encyclopedia of conquest. You watch him work. He is not writing about the heavens. He is examining a specimen of a thorny, unprepossessing shrub, its roots still caked with the red soil of the Atlas foothills. Beside it lies a report from a military surgeon in the garrison at Fez. The report details how a decoction made from this plant, a local Amazigh remedy, has proven more effective against the deadly fevers that plague Spanish soldiers than any Galenic treatment known to European medicine. Fray Benito makes a careful, precise drawing of the plant, annotating it with its local name, its properties, and the method of its preparation. This is not idle botany. This is bioprospecting in the service of empire. Every plant is a potential drug, a new crop, a resource to be catalogued and exploited. On another table lies the work of his cartographers. For decades, Spanish military surveyors have been mapping Nueva Castilla. The result is a map unlike any seen before. It is not a thing of myth, decorated with sea monsters and fanciful kingdoms. It is a tool. It shows topography with chilling precision, marking mountain passes, sources of fresh water, and the defensibility of every valley, but it is overlaid with another layer of information. It shows the boundaries of tribal lands, the linguistic divisions between different Amazigh groups, and notes on their historic allegiances and blood feuds. It is a map of the human landscape as much as the physical one. It is an instrument for a new kind of war, a war of divide and conquer, a war of information. The driving force behind this revolution is necessity. Spain is not rich. As you learned in Augsburg, it is a perpetually indebted state, its African colony, a constant drain. The only way to make Nueva Castilla profitable, to make it sustain itself and the wider empire, is to understand it, master it, and bend it to the will of the crown. And so, the great intellectual energies of Spain have been channeled into the applied sciences, where Copernicus and Kepler of another timeline would be wrestling with celestial mechanics. The great minds of Salamanca are wrestling with hydraulic engineering. They are not reading Greek poetry. They are translating captured Arabic treatises on irrigation. The Roman aqueducts and qanats of the Maghreb are not just ruins to be admired. They are systems to be studied, repaired, and improved to expand the wheat and sugar plantations that are the colony's lifeblood. The scientific problems are not theoretical. They are brutally practical. How do you move water across a desert? How do you calculate the tax burden on a village without sparking a rebellion? How do you predict the movement of nomadic tribes? The ethical tension of this scientific revolution is that it is entirely divorced from humanism. It is a science of control. The nascent ethnography practiced by Fray Benito and his colleagues is a perfect example. They compile lexicons of the Tamazight languages, not to appreciate their poetry, but to create more effective translators for military interrogations. They study the social structure of the mountain tribes, not to understand a different way of life, but to identify the grievances and rivalries that Spanish agents can exploit. They are creating the science of colonial administration, a dispassionate, analytical approach to the subjugation of a people. Fray Benito is no monster. In his own mind, he is bringing order to chaos, replacing superstition with reason, and making the colony more efficient, which he believes will ultimately benefit both the rulers and the ruled. The knowledge he gathers is true. The purpose for which it is gathered is domination. The most unexpected twist is the attitude of the Spanish Inquisition. In our world, the Inquisition would become a fierce enemy of the new science, seeing in the Copernican model a direct challenge to the authority of Scripture. But this science, this earthbound, practical, and deeply useful science, the Inquisition champions it. Why? Because it poses no theological threat. Mapping a mountain range does not question the story of Genesis. Studying the medicinal properties of a plant does not challenge the divinity of Christ. This science is a servant of the state and, by extension, the Church. It helps the empire secure its borders, suppress its enemies, and fund its holy mission. The Grand Inquisitor himself is a patron of the Estudio de las Cosas de Africa. The intellectual energy that might have gone into dangerous cosmological speculation is safely channeled into productive, terrestrial concerns. Spain, therefore, becomes a scientific leader, but in a completely different paradigm. It is a science that reinforces the established order rather than threatening to tear it down. You leave Fray Benito's study and walk through the halls of the university. You see the students. They are not the sons of adventurers dreaming of gold. They are the future administrators of Nueva Castilla. They are studying law, but also agronomy. They are learning theology, but also surveying and cartography. They are being trained to be the most effective colonial bureaucrats the world has ever seen. The great intellectual schism of this world is not between faith and reason. It is between two kinds of reason. In the north, in the Protestant states of Germany and later in England, a more theoretical, abstract science may one day emerge. But here, in the Catholic South, science has become the handmaiden of power. Its greatest achievements are not new theories of the universe, but new techniques for controlling it. The scientific revolution has happened, but it has a southern accent, pragmatic, ruthless, and rooted not in wonder, but in the grim, unending business of managing an empire. You are walking through a forest of stone. Above you, a riot of spires, turrets, and chimneys claws at the sky. A skyline so impossibly complex it looks more like a geological formation than a work of human hands. This is the Château de Chambord, deep in the Loire Valley. It is 1542. This is not a fortress built for defense. It is a declaration. It is a hunting lodge with the soul of a cathedral, a monument to a kingdom that is not merely surviving, but thriving with an almost arrogant vitality. This is the house of a king who is winning. The air here is cool and damp, smelling of the river and the deep woods, not of the dust and desperation that chokes the Spanish court. The master of this palace, Francis I, King of France, is not a man consumed by a holy war on a distant, profitless frontier. He is a man who understands power in its most modern, most fluid form, as a game of leverage, diplomacy, and the strategic application of wealth. In our world, Francis I was a brilliant but ultimately frustrated figure, a king who spent his life caught in the iron jaws of the Habsburg encirclement, Spain to the south, the Holy Roman Empire to the east. Here that encirclement is a rusting, broken chain. The Spanish jaw is blunted, its teeth ground down in the endless attritional warfare of Nueva Castilla. The imperial jaw is loose. Its master, Charles V, a titan chained to the ledgers of his bankers, unable to impose his will upon his own rebellious German princes. And so, Francis is free. He has broken out. He is no longer the defender of France. He is the arbiter of Europe. You are led into a private study, away from the boisterous energy of the royal hunt. The room is hung with Italian tapestries and smells of oiled leather and French wine. The king is here, his hunting clothes exchanged for a velvet doublet. Francis I is in his prime, a tall man with a long nose and an easy, predatory confidence. His eyes are sharp, missing nothing. He is a man who appreciates beauty in art, in women, in a well-executed political maneuver. With him is a man who does not belong in this world of courtly splendor. He is a German, his clothes plain, his bearing stiff and severe. He is an envoy from Philip of Hesse, a leader of the Schmalkaldic League, the alliance of Protestant princes within the Holy Roman Empire. In another world, this meeting would be an act of desperate treason on the Germans' part, a plea for help. Here, it is a negotiation between equals. His Majesty Charles continues to demand that the Prince of Hesse and his allies renounce the Augsburg Confession. The German says, his French formal and correct. He threatens an imperial ban. He seeks to crush us. Francis swirls the wine in his goblet, watching the ruby liquid catch the light. My cousin Charles is a man of convictions, he says, a slight smile playing on his lips. It is his most expensive luxury. Our convictions are not for sale, the German replies. But our armies require maintenance. Our cities need stronger walls. The emperor may be poor, but he is not powerless. He can still bring a great host against us if he can unite the Catholic princes. Francis sets down his goblet. The game is beginning. And what does the League offer the King of France in return for his friendship? A German war, the envoy says simply. A fire on the Emperor's own lands that will keep him from ever again troubling the borders of your kingdom. As long as we stand, Charles cannot bring his full might against you. We are your eastern wall. This is the central, shocking truth of the new Europe. France, the self-proclaimed eldest daughter of the Church, the kingdom of the most Christian king, is about to become the official patron of the Protestant Reformation. This is the ethical tension, and it is a chasm. You have seen the posters in Paris, ordering the arrest and execution of Huguenots. You know of the Affaire des Placards, when Protestant declarations denouncing the Mass appeared across the country, even on the door of the king's own bedchamber, an act that unleashed a wave of brutal repression. Within his own borders, Francis is a hammer of heresy. Yet here, in this room, he is preparing to become its shield and sword abroad. The German envoy, a man of sincere Protestant faith, cannot hide his own discomfort. Your Majesty burns our brethren in Paris, he says, his voice low. Yet, you would offer us gold to defend our faith in Wittenberg? Francis leans forward, his eyes locking with the envoy's. The charming Renaissance prince vanishes, replaced by something older and colder. I do not offer you gold to defend your faith. I care nothing for the ramblings of your Saxon monk. I offer you gold to defend your princes, your German liberties, your political division. Your faith is your own affair. Your utility to France is mine. He stands and walks to a large map of Europe laid out on a table. You must understand, he says, his finger tracing the borders of his kingdom. I am a Catholic king, yes, but I am the king of France first. My soul belongs to God. My kingdom belongs to me. Charles imagines a universal Christian empire. One throne, one altar, a pleasant dream. But a France that is merely a province of that empire is a nightmare. I will ally with the Protestant, the Turk, or the devil himself if it will keep my kingdom whole and the Habsburgs divided. This is not hypocrisy. It is the birth of a new and terrible political morality, raison d'etat, the reason of state. The state, for the first time, is being imagined as an entity with its own interests, its own soul, and its own salvation, separate from that of its ruler or its people. Its survival justifies any alliance, any betrayal, any contradiction. The deal is struck. A river of French gold will begin to flow into the coffers of the Schmalkaldic League. It will pay for mercenaries, for cannons, for fortifications. It will ensure that the Holy Roman Empire remains a fractured, warring patchwork, a perpetual thorn in the emperor's side. The unexpected twist is how devastatingly effective this strategy becomes. With French backing, the Protestant princes do not just survive, they thrive. Charles V, his resources already drained by Africa, can never muster the strength to crush them. The early, pragmatic peace you witnessed in Augsburg becomes an ironclad reality, guaranteed by French power. But it is a peace that ensures permanent division. By propping up the German princes, France guarantees that Germany will not become a nation. It will remain a geographic expression, a mosaic of petty states that can be manipulated, bribed, and played off against each other for the next 300 years. France, by acting as the arbiter of the Reformation, ensures its own continental supremacy. It has turned its greatest rival, the Holy Roman Empire, into a permanent buffer state, a playground for French diplomacy, and a recruiting ground for French armies. Francis I has reshaped the destiny of Europe. He has exchanged the medieval ideal of a unified Christendom for the modern reality of a brutal, unending chess match between sovereign states. The continent will not be defined by faith, but by the raw, cynical calculus of power. And in this new game, a France unburdened by a colonial quagmire, and facing a weakened rival holds all the best pieces. From the stone forest of Chambord, the Valois king looks out upon a continent he is remaking in his own image. You have left the world of European courts and their sophisticated hypocrisies. You have travelled south, past the coastal plains of Nueva Castilla, beyond the high peaks of the Atlas, into the searing emptiness where the mountains crumble into the desert. You are in Sigil Masa. In another age, this was a city of legends, a jewelled buckle on the great belt of the Sahara. It was the northern terminus of the salt and gold roads, a place where caravans arrived laden with ivory and ostrich feathers, their merchants and scholars bringing the news and learning of the great Sahelian empires of Ghana, of Mali, of Songhai. It was a city of exchange, a vibrant nexus of cultures. Now, it is a city of silence and chains. The year is 1610. The old, labyrinthine city has been refortified by Spanish engineers. Its mud brick walls are now buttressed with stone bastions, its gates guarded by grim-faced men in steel helmets, their armour coated in a permanent film of fine red dust. Sigil Masa is no longer a marketplace. It is a processing depot. It is the funnel through which the human wealth of a continent is being drained. You are in the office of the Gobernador de la Frontera del Sur, the governor of the southern frontier, a man named Don Alvaro de Zúñiga. His office is an oasis of Spanish order in the chaos of the desert. The furniture is dark, heavy wood imported from Castile. On his desk, immaculate ledgers are kept in a precise, spidery hand. On the wall hangs a crucifix and a detailed map of the caravan routes, a map that is both a masterpiece of Spanish cartography and a diagram of human misery. Don Alvaro is a product of the new Spanish science you saw in Salamanca. He is not a swashbuckling conquistador, he is a bureaucrat of empire. He speaks of his work not in terms of morality, but of logistics. The labour problem on the coast was reaching a crisis point, he explains, his voice dry, devoid of emotion, as if discussing crop yields. The local Moriscos are unsuitable, prone to rebellion and sickness. We attempted to use convicts from the mainland, but the supply was insufficient. The solution, as it so often is, was to rationalize the existing systems. He gestures to the map. The trade in slaves from the Bilad al-Sudan, the land of the blacks, has existed for centuries. It was, however, inefficient. A haphazard affair run by Tuareg, chieftains and local merchants for a handful of domestic servants, and eunuchs for the emir's courts. We have provided it with structure, with capital. You already know what this structure means. You have seen the warehouses. Spanish agents do not ride south to capture anyone. The risk is too great, the climate too punishing. Instead, they have co-opted the very people who once controlled the trade. They provide the Tuareg and their client tribes with muskets from Spanish armories, and iron bars from Biscay forges commodities more valuable than gold in the endless internecine wars of the Sahel. In return, the Tuareg deliver a single commodity: human beings. The demand is no longer for a few dozen servants. It is for thousands, tens of thousands of bodies to feed the insatiable appetite of the sugar and wheat plantations on the coast. War in the Sahel has been transformed. It is no longer about territory or dynastic succession. It is about harvesting people. Spanish muskets have given certain tribes an overwhelming advantage, allowing them to raid their neighbours on an unprecedented scale, turning entire regions into desolate, depopulated hunting grounds. A bell rings outside. The weekly consignment has arrived, Don Alvaro says, standing up. You should observe the process. It is a model of efficiency. You follow him out into the courtyard. A vast, walled square baked by the Sunday. What you see there will burn itself into your memory. A caravan of 1,000 camels has arrived. But you barely notice the animals. You see only the human cargo they have brought. Hundreds of men, women, and children, roped together at the neck, stumble through the gates. They are naked, or nearly so, their bodies covered in sores and the filth of a month-long trek across the world's greatest desert. Their eyes are vacant with thirst, terror, and exhaustion. The silence from them is the most terrifying sound you have ever heard. Spanish officials, assisted by local overseers, move among them with the detached air of cattle inspectors. They check teeth, lift limbs, assess muscle. Children are separated from mothers with a casual shove. Those too weak to stand, who have somehow survived the journey only to collapse at its end, are dragged to one side. They will not be fed. They are a loss to be recorded in a ledger. The efficiency that Don Alvaro spoke of is now on full display. A blacksmith's forge glows in one corner of the courtyard. The able-bodied captives are forced to their knees, and a hot iron brand, in the shape of the cross of Castile, is pressed into the flesh of their shoulders. Their screams are sharp, sudden bursts of agony in the suffocating heat. They are no longer people. They are property of the Spanish crown, inventoried and marked. This is the ethical tension, brought to its most horrific extreme. Don Alvaro and his men are not frothing sadists. They are cogs in a machine. They are solving a problem. They are filling a quota. The language they use is one of accounting and administration. They have created a system that places a continent's worth of distance between the act of violence, the raid on a village, 1,000 miles to the south, and the economic benefit on the coast. This bureaucratic abstraction makes the Holocaust possible. They are not murderers, they are managers. The unexpected twist lies in what has been destroyed to create this monstrous system. You speak to an old Tuareg merchant, a man who remembers the days before the Spanish came. He sits in the shade, his face, the colour of tanned leather, a mask of resignation. "It was gold," he whispers, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "The caravans brought gold. We carried it with salt from the north. The salt was for the kings of the south, the gold for the emirs of the north. There was also ivory, leather from Kano, cola nuts. It was a trade of rich things, a trade of honour." He looks at the branding, and for the first time you see a flicker of shame in his eyes. Now, there is only this. The Spanish do not want gold. They say our gold is a pittance compared to what their king needs. They want only bodies. So we bring them bodies. And the roads that once carried kings' treasures now carry only sorrow. The gold mines of the south are falling into disuse. The great markets are closing. The old honor is gone. There is only the gun and the chain. In their single-minded pursuit of labor, the Spanish have not just hijacked the trans-Saharan trade, they have annihilated it. The complex, centuries-old economic web that connected West Africa to the Mediterranean has been reduced to a single, brutal, unsustainable thread. They have turned a river of diverse commerce into a sewer pipe of human flesh. You return to Don Alvaro's office. He is making a notation in his ledger. A successful shipment, he remarks without looking up. Mortality was only 30%. An improvement. You look from his clean, precise handwriting to the window, where the sun beats down on the branded, weeping human beings in the courtyard. You realize you are witnessing the birth of a new kind of evil. The evil of the spreadsheet, the morality of the bottom line. An atrocity committed not by monsters, but by clerks. You are standing on a rain-slicked headland, the wind whipping a fine, cold mist into your face. The land around you is a riot of green, an almost aggressive fecundity that seems to swallow light and sound. The air is heavy with the smell of damp earth, unknown blossoms, and the distant, smoky scent of wood fires. This is not the parched ochre of Africa or the manicured green of Europe. This is a different world. The year is 1588. The place, somewhere on the coast of what we would call the Yucatan Peninsula. From the deck of the ship anchored in the bay below, a small longboat is being rowed ashore. The men in it are not Spanish. They do not wear the morion helmets and steel breastplates of the tercios. They are fair-haired, their faces ruddy from the Atlantic wind, and they wear woolen cloaks and leather jerkins. The flag that snaps from the stern of their ship, the Sea Dragon, is not the red and gold of Castile, but the red cross of Street George on a white field. These are Englishmen. They are not conquistadors. They are traders, pirates, and opportunists. A motley crew sailing under a charter from a queen, Elizabeth I, who has a hungry treasury and a growing rivalry with Portugal's suffocating maritime monopoly. For decades, English and French privateers have been nibbling at the edges of the Portuguese Empire, raiding sugar shipments from Brazil, probing for weaknesses. But this voyage is different. Pushed off course by a hurricane, seeking fresh water and a place to repair a cracked mast, the Sea Dragon has stumbled into the great, gaping hole in the European map of the world. They have found the lands that Columbus never did. Captain Thomas Cavendish leads the shore party. He is a gentleman adventurer, a man of education and ruthless ambition, a younger, harder version of Francis Drake from our timeline. He steps onto the beach, his boots sinking into the white sand, and draws his sword. He is not here to conquer for God and a king. He is here to assess the opportunities for profit and strategic advantage for a queen. Their first contact is not the violent, shocking collision of the Spanish encounters in our history. The local Maya people, from a small coastal chiefdom, emerge from the dense foliage, not with the terror of people seeing gods or monsters, but with a wary curiosity. These Englishmen are not a conquering army. They are a few dozen half-drowned sailors. They do not have horses, which in another world would have been terrifying engines of war. They do not have priests demanding immediate conversion. Cavendish, a pragmatic man, does not read a requerimiento. He offers a gift, a small hand mirror. The local chieftain, his face and body covered in intricate tattoos, accepts it. He is fascinated by his own reflection. In return, he offers them fruit and fresh water. A trade has been initiated. It is a meeting of two deeply alien cultures, but it begins on a footing of cautious, mutual utility. The English spend weeks repairing their ship. During this time, they learn. They learn that this is not a savage island, but the edge of a vast and complex land. They hear tales of great cities of stone deep in the interior, of a powerful empire to the west, ruled by a king who wears feathers and gold. They see the locals cultivating maize, a crop unknown to them. They see them smoking tobacco. They trade iron knives and cheap glass beads for small gold ornaments and, more importantly, for information. The ethical tension of this encounter is subtle, almost insidious. It is not the overt righteous brutality of the Spanish Crusade. The English do not see the Maya as souls to be saved. They see them as potential business partners or potential obstacles to profit. Their view is not theological, it is commercial. They are not here to build a new Jerusalem. They are here to open a new market. This seems, on the surface, more humane, but it is a humanity that is conditional, based on the natives' ability to provide something of value. The moment they cease to be useful, their humanity will be just as disposable. The unexpected twist is the role of disease. The Columbian exchange is still inevitable. An English sailor, suffering from a mild case of the measles, infects the local village. But the outcome is profoundly different from our timeline. The Spanish arrived in the Americas with the full, shocking force of a conquering army. Disease was followed swiftly by the sword, by enslavement, by the utter shattering of social structures. The virgin soil epidemics were amplified by the synergistic effects of war and exploitation. Here, the sea dragon sails away before the full horror of the epidemic unfolds. The disease sweeps through the coastal villages, killing with terrifying efficiency. It is an apocalypse, but it is an apocalypse without conquerors on its heels. There is no army marching in to take advantage of the chaos, no priests to interpret the plague as divine punishment. The Maya political structures, though terribly wounded, are not decapitated. The survivors have time to absorb the blow, time to recover, time to develop immunities, and most importantly, time to understand the nature of the threat. The strangers from the sea bring a strange and terrible death with them. This becomes a core piece of intelligence that travels inland, along the same trade routes that carry news of the stone cities. When Cavendish returns to England a year later, his hold is not filled with treasure. It is filled with artifacts, strange plants, maize, tobacco, chili peppers, and a wild, almost unbelievable story. He presents his findings to Queen Elizabeth's council. He unrolls a crude map he has drawn. He speaks not of conversion, but of trade monopolies and strategic bases from which to challenge Portuguese power. The English approach to this new world is, from its inception, commercial and competitive. They are not driven by a 700-year-old crusading impulse. They are driven by the new realities of European power politics. They see these new lands as a potential weight to throw onto the scales in their struggle against Portugal and, to a lesser extent, a France that is now the continental hegemon. The first English colonies, established a generation later, are not encomiendas. They are trading posts, modelled on the Portuguese forts in the Indies. They are established by chartered companies, the Virginia Company, the Plymouth Company, whose goal is to return a profit to their shareholders. They come to trade for whatever is valuable, and only when trade fails or is insufficient do they turn to conquest. And even then, it is a piecemeal, opportunistic conquest, not a grand, state-sponsored holy war. You stand on that same headland 2 decades later. A fortified English town, Jamestown, now stands where the Maya village once did. The relationship with the native peoples is not one of master and serf. It is one of wary, often violent, rivalry, a long, drawn-out frontier war between two sovereign peoples. The English have not conquered an empire. They are carving out a foothold on the edge of a continent whose vast, powerful, and now forewarned civilizations remain intact in the interior. The Aztec and Inca empires, having survived the first, deadliest waves of disease, have now had a generation to understand the threat. When the Europeans finally come for them, they will not be facing men they mistake for gods. They will be facing men they know to be the harbingers of a deadly plague and a dangerous new technology, and they will be ready to fight. You are in a place that has fallen off the maps of the world, a forgotten fold in the earth's crust, where the sun has burned away all frivolity. The desert south of the Atlas is a kingdom of absolutes. Heat and cold, life and death, thirst and water. For 2 centuries, this has been a land of ghosts, haunted by the memory of the salt and gold caravans, its oases shrinking, its people scattered or enslaved by the relentless northward pull of the Spanish machine. But now, something is changing. The silence is over. You are part of a gathering, a great confluence of human currents in a dry riverbed, a wadi shielded from the wind by high rock walls. Thousands of people are here, their faces lean and burned dark by the Sunday. You see the indigo-dyed veils of the Tuareg, the proud bearing of Sanhaja warriors, the dark, intense faces of Fulani scholars from the south. These are the broken peoples, the dispossessed, the tribes whose ancient rivalries were turned into a mutual slaughterhouse by the Spanish demand for slaves and the Spanish supply of muskets. Today, they are not here as rivals. They stand together, shoulder to shoulder, their old blood feuds cauterized by a new, hotter fire. They are all looking at one man. He stands on a high rock, his figure silhouetted against the unforgiving blue of the sky. He is not a king. He wears no silks, no jewels. His only garment is a simple, patched woolen robe, a jibba, a sign of his poverty and his rejection of the world's vanities. He is young, perhaps 30, but his eyes seem to hold the accumulated suffering of all the generations before him. His name is Yahya ibn Khalid. He is a scholar, a mystic, a man who has spent years in the deep desert, communing with God and the emptiness. But the name his followers use is not Yahya. They call him the Mahdi, the guided one. When he speaks, his voice is not loud, but it has the terrible clarity of shattering glass. It cuts through the shimmering heat, and every man and woman in the wadi falls silent. You ask why God has forsaken us, he cries, his voice resonating from the rock face. You look at the chains on your brothers in Sijil Masa. You see the crosses on the mosques in Fez. You hear the weeping of the women whose children are taken. And you ask, where is God? He pauses, letting the question hang in the dead air. I will tell you where he is. He is waiting. He is waiting for you to become worthy of his victory. For 200 years we have been a people of compromises. We have traded with the infidel. We have adopted their ways. We have fought each other for the scraps they throw from their table. In the mountains our brothers pray to a twisted, sun-scorched Christ, mixing the truth of the prophet Isa with the filth of the idolaters. We have become impure, and this Spanish plague is God's punishment for our impurity. This is the central, terrifying pillar of his message. The source of their suffering is not just the Spanish, it is their own corruption. This is not just a call to war, it is a call to purification. This is the logical, inevitable backlash. The Spanish invasion, the horror of the slave trade, the slow cultural poison of the mountain heresies, all have created the perfect ecological niche for a movement of absolute, radical purity to emerge. The Mahdi is the antibody produced by the body politic of the Maghreb in response to 2 centuries of infection. He is the fever that will either kill the disease or destroy the patient. But the age of weeping is over. His voice rises. becoming a roar. The age of purification is at hand. I am the servant of God, the one foretold, sent to sweep the filth from this land and restore the one true faith. There is no Tuareg, no Berber, no Arab. There is only the Ummah of the believers. There is no law but God's law, no king but God. We will wash the land clean with water if we can, and with blood if we must. A roar of Allahu Akbar rises from the thousands, a single percussive wave of sound that shakes the very air. In that moment, 100 fractured tribes become a single weapon. The ethical tension of this moment is a razor's edge. You are witnessing the birth of a liberation movement, a righteous uprising against a brutal colonial oppressor. Your soul wants to cheer for them, but you can see the darkness woven into the heart of their light. The Mahdi's vision of purity has no room for nuance, no space for mercy. His sword will fall not just on the Spanish governor in his palace, but on the Morisco villager in the Atlas who has made a desperate peace with a syncretic god. It will fall on the Muslim merchant in Iran who trades with the Spanish, on anyone deemed a collaborator or a heretic. This is not a war for freedom in a modern sense. It is a war for a different kind of submission, a totalitarian theocracy forged in the crucible of righteous anger. The first target is chosen, not a major coastal city, bristling with Spanish cannons. The Mahdi is a brilliant strategist. He will strike at the heart of the Spanish system of exploitation. He will strike at Sijil Masa. The unexpected twist is the nature of his army. The Spanish garrisons are complacent. They are used to tribal raids, brief, chaotic affairs that can be broken by a disciplined volley of musket fire. They do not know what is coming. The Mahdi has not just united the tribes, he has transformed them. His followers have been capturing Spanish weapons for years. More importantly, he has instilled in them an iron discipline, a fanatical devotion that mocks the sullen obedience of the Spanish conscripts who are paid to be there. His warriors are not fighting for a wage. They are fighting for a place in paradise. You are with the vanguard of the Mahdist army as it sweeps out of the desert. They do not move like a tribal horde. They move in disciplined formations, a silent, swift river of men under the pale light of the moon. They reach Sijil Masa at dawn. The attack is not a wild charge. It is a coordinated assault. Teams of warriors scale the walls while others storm the gates. The Spanish garrison is caught completely by surprise. The fighting in the streets is a vicious, merciless affair. The Spanish soldiers fighting for their lives are overwhelmed by men who embrace death as a form of martyrdom. By noon, the red and gold flag of Castile is torn from the citadel and trampled into the dust. You find yourself in the courtyard you witnessed years before, the place of branding and despair. Now, it is a place of execution. The governor, Don Alvaro de Zúñiga, the man of ledgers and logistics, is dragged before the Mahdi in chains. He does not beg. He stares at his captor with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "You are a demon." The Spaniard spits. "No," the Mahdi says, his voice quiet now. "I am the accounting. I am the debt that has come due." He nods to one of his guards, who steps forward and slits the governor's throat. The purification begins. The city's small church is torn down, stone by stone. Every known collaborator, every merchant who grew rich on the slave trade, is put to the sword. The warehouses are thrown open, and the hundreds of newly arrived captives are freed. Many of them, bewildered and broken, immediately swear allegiance to the man they see as their savior. They will become the most zealous of his followers. The news of the fall of Sijil Masa will travel north like a shockwave. To the Spanish, it will be an inconceivable disaster, the first crack in the edifice of their African empire. To the oppressed Moriscos in the mountains and the resentful Muslims in the coastal cities, it will be a sign, a whispered promise of a coming storm. The Reconquista has begun. The Mahdi of the Red Sands has ignited a fire that will now consume the entire continent. The war was not just for land, it was for the soul of God himself. You are in Cadiz, the city that has become the beating heart of Spain's African empire. It is 1612. For 2 centuries, this port has been a one-way street of empire. Ships departing with soldiers and supplies, returning with sugar, wheat, and the sad human cargo of the slave markets. It has been a city of quiet, bureaucratic confidence. Now, for the first time in living memory, it is a city of fear. The fear has a name: the Mahdi. The fall of Sijil Massa was not an isolated frontier incident. It was the first trumpet blast of an apocalypse. In the 2 years since, the Mahdist war has swept northward out of the desert, a human firestorm, consuming everything in its path. One by one, the inland garrisons have fallen. The great city of Fez, the mountain citadel of Marrakesh. The Spanish Empire in Africa is collapsing from the inside out. The war that is now being fought is unlike any the Spanish have ever known. This is not a war against emirs who could be bought or tribes who could be divided. It is a war against an idea. The Mahdi's forces are not a conventional army. They are a popular revolution, a crusade in reverse. Everywhere they go, the local populations rise up to join them. The Moriscos of the Atlas, with their strange, syncretic faith, have flocked to his banner. Their warrior Christ, a perfect stepping stone to the Mahdi's puritanical Islam. The urban poor in the coastal cities riot, opening the gates to the Mahdist armies from within. Spain's vast project of colonial science, the meticulous maps and ethnographic studies, has become useless. The information is out of date. The tribal rivalries they were meant to exploit have been erased by the Mahdi's call for unity. The irrigation systems they so carefully engineered now water the crops of a rebel army. The empire is being devoured by its own subjects. You are at a meeting of the Council of the Indies, now unofficially renamed the Council of Africa, in a dark, sombre room in Madrid. The faces of the men around the table are pale and drawn. They are grandsons of the men who built this empire, and they are presiding over its ruin. The reports from the front are read aloud. A litany of disasters. The Tercio of Granada, encircled at Tlemcen, has been annihilated. We have no survivors. The governor of Oran reports that half his native auxiliaries have deserted to the enemy, taking their weapons with them. Our revenues from the sugar plantations have fallen by 90%. The fields have been burned, the overseers murdered. The king, Philip III, a pious but indecisive man, looks to his chief minister, the Duke of Lerma. What do? We have sent more men. We have sent our best generals. Why can we not crush this desert prophet? The Duke of Lerma, a man who has grown rich on the corruption of the state, gives the only answer he can. We must send more. A new tax must be levied on Castile. We must raise a new army. This is no longer a colonial matter, Your Majesty. This is an invasion. The enemy is at our very doorstep. Lee Prusand, A.T. He is not exaggerating. The war has already bled back across the Strait of Gibraltar. Mahdist preachers, smuggled across in fishing boats, are finding fertile ground in the mountains of Andalusia, among the descendants of those few Muslims who had avoided expulsion by converting. Secret mosques are reappearing in the Alpujarras. The Morisco problem, which Spain thought it had solved a century ago, is roaring back to life. The Inquisition is working overtime, but for every heretic it burns, a dozen more are created by the news from Africa. The ethical tension has inverted. For 2 centuries, Spain has been the aggressor, the colonizer, the oppressor. Now, in its own mind, it is the victim. The war is framed in the pulpits and royal decrees as a defense of Christendom itself. The Mahdi is not a freedom fighter. He is the Antichrist. The war is no longer about profit or empire. It is an existential struggle for the soul of Spain. This psychological shift allows the Spanish state to justify any measure, no matter how brutal. Entire villages in Nueva Castilla, suspected of sympathizing with the Mahdi, are put to the sword. A new, desperate cruelty is born of fear. The unexpected twist is the catastrophic impact on Spain itself. The nation is hollowed out by this endless war on its southern flank. In our timeline, Spain declined because its American silver fueled inflation and endless European wars. This Spain declines for a simpler, more brutal reason. It is bleeding to death. The best of its young men are conscripted and sent to die of disease and battle in the African Sunday. The wool industry of Castile, once the engine of its economy, collapses as the state seizes the sheep to feed its armies. The intellectual life of Salamanca shrivels. The practical sciences of colonial administration are useless when there is no longer a colony to administer, only a war to fight. The nation turns inward, becoming paranoid, reactionary, and obsessed. The enemy is no longer just across the water. He is within the gates, in the secret thoughts of one's neighbours. You return to Cadiz. The city is no longer a bustling commercial port. It is a fortress, the forward operating base for a war that can never be won. The shipyards are working at a frantic pace, but they are not building merchantmen. They are building shallow draft galleys, warships designed for coastal bombardment and the desperate work of evacuating garrisons before they are overrun. You stand on the battlements, looking south across the water. The sun sets, staining the sky the colour of blood. On a clear night, you can sometimes see the fires on the African coast, the fires of the Mahdi's camps, burning ever closer. The Reconquista, the great defining project of Spanish history, was supposed to have ended in triumph in 1492. Instead, it never ended. It simply crossed the strait, metastasized, and has now returned home as a horrific, all-consuming cancer. This is the ultimate irony. In its quest to utterly dominate its old Islamic foe, to secure its borders and purify its faith, Spain has become forever chained to its enemy. Its culture, its economy, its very soul are now defined by this single apocalyptic struggle. The war is not just in Africa anymore, it is in the Spanish mind. It is a siege that will last for generations. A slow, grinding process of national exhaustion from which Spain will never recover. The mirror of Granada has been shattered, and its sharpest sliver is now pointed directly at the heart of the nation that broke it. You are breathing air that has not changed in 500 years. It is the air of Venice, a city-state that, in this world, has forgotten how to decline. The year is 1650. In another timeline, this would be Venice's twilight. The city would be a beautiful museum, its commercial power long since bled away by the oceanic trade routes that bypassed it, its political relevance eclipsed by the great Atlantic powers. It would be a city of memories, of ghosts in gilded palaces. But here, on the Grand Canal, the ghosts are very much alive. The water is not filled with the melancholic gondolas of tourists. It is a bustling highway of commerce, choked with heavy barges from the Po Valley, sleek galleys from the Levant, and broad-beamed merchant cogs from the Hanseatic League. The Rialto Bridge is not a landmark. It is the chaotic, screaming heart of the world's stock exchange. Venice is not in its twilight. It is basking in the golden light of a long, uninterrupted afternoon. The reason is simple. The world did not pivot. The discovery of the Americas by the English was a slow burn, a gradual opening of a new frontier, not the sudden, explosive gold rush of the Spanish conquest. The primary axis of global trade has remained exactly where it has been since the days of Rome, in the Mediterranean. And in the Mediterranean, Venice is queen. You are in the Doge's palace, in the Sala del Collegio, where the Republic's leaders meet. The room is a masterpiece of propaganda, its ceiling painted by Veronese, with allegories of Venetian virtue and power. The men who sit here are not titled nobles in the feudal sense. They are the heads of great merchant families, men whose patents of nobility are their account books. They are pragmatic, unsentimental, and possess the best intelligence network in the world. Today, they are listening to a report from their bailo, their ambassador in Constantinople. He is a man named Alvise Contarini, and his report is a masterclass in Venetian realpolitik. The Ottoman Sultan, Ibrahim I, continues his war against the Persian heretics. Contarini says, his voice a dry, unemotional whisper. His attention is entirely to the east. The Grand Vizier has assured me, in exchange for our continued neutrality and a significant contribution to his personal treasury, that the trade agreements guaranteeing our access to the ports of Alexandria and Aleppo will be renewed for another 20 years. A murmur of approval runs through the room. This is the secret of Venice's prolonged golden age. The two great military superpowers of the age, Habsburg Spain and the Ottoman Empire, have been locked in their own existential struggles. Spain is consumed by the bottomless pit of the Mahdist War in Africa. The Ottomans, blocked from westward expansion and obsessed with the Safavid threat, have spent a century and a half pouring their resources into the mountains of Persia and the plains of Mesopotamia. This has created a power vacuum in the central and eastern Mediterranean, a vacuum that Venice, with its powerful navy and unparalleled diplomatic skill, has exploited to perfection. They are the neutral middlemen, the indispensable interlocutors, the one power trusted by no one but needed by everyone. They ship grain to a starving Constantinople. They sell Balkan timber to a Spanish navy desperate to rebuild its fleet. They transport Muslim pilgrims to Alexandria and Christian pilgrims to the Holy Land, taking a profit from both. The ethical tension lies in this profitable neutrality. The Venetians are masters of the double game. They are a Christian republic, and their rhetoric is full of crusading zeal when it suits them. The Battle of Lepanto, in this timeline, never happened. There was no Holy League to fight it. Instead, Venetian admirals have fought alongside Ottoman fleets against Portuguese pirates encroaching on the Red Sea trade routes, while simultaneously selling weapons-grade saltpeter to the Spanish to use against the Mahdi's forces in Africa. They have no permanent allies, only permanent interests. Their survival, their prosperity, is their only morality. They have grown rich on the conflicts that are tearing their neighbours apart, acting as the war profiteer of an entire civilization. The unexpected twist is the cultural consequence of this prolonged prosperity. In our world, the Italian Renaissance burned brightly, and then faded, as the peninsula became a battleground for foreign powers and the economic centre of gravity shifted. Here, it never stopped. You leave the Doge's palace and walk to the opera house, the Teatro San Cassiano. Opera, a new and fantastically expensive art form, was born here. And it is thriving, its productions growing more elaborate with each passing year. You listen to the music of a composer named Claudio Monteverdi, who in this timeline lives to a ripe old age, his genius nurtured by endless commissions from wealthy patrons. The city is a hothouse of artistic and scientific innovation. Its printing presses, the most famous in Europe, churn out not just Bibles, but new works of philosophy, poetry, and science. You visit the workshop of a lens grinder near the Rialto. His name is Galileo Galilei. He is not a Paduan professor, locked in a desperate struggle with the Roman Inquisition. Here, in the fiercely independent Republic of Venice, which has its own long and fraught history with the papacy, he is a celebrated inventor. The Inquisition's reach is weak. He has built a telescope, yes, and he has looked at the stars. But his most profitable invention, the one that has made him a wealthy man, is not a tool for cosmology. It is a military-grade spyglass, which he has sold to the Venetian navy for a fortune, allowing their ships to identify enemies and prey from twice the distance of their rivals. In Venice, science is patronized when it is profitable. The city is a paradox. It is a republic, but it is ruled by a closed oligarchy. It is a bastion of a certain kind of intellectual freedom, but its state security, the Council of Ten, is one of the most feared and efficient secret police forces in the world. It is a city of unparalleled beauty and artistic achievement, and its wealth is built on a foundation of cynical exploitation and amoral neutrality. Venice has become the new Byzantium, a state that survives not through brute force, but through cunning, wealth, and its position at the crossroads of a world that has failed to change. It is a relic, a beautiful, brilliant, and morally complicated fossil, preserved in the amber of a historical accident. As you stand on the Rialto, watching the endless flow of goods and money, you realize that Venice's greatest achievement is not its art or its empire. It is its sheer, stubborn, magnificent survival in a world that should have passed it by. You are in a watchtower, one of the ancient stone sentinels that dot the coastline of Andalusia. The year is 1830. The stone under your hand is cold, worn smooth by the hands of countless watchmen over 3 centuries. Your name is General Mateo del Rio, and you have spent 40 of your 60 years fighting Spain's one, true, eternal enemy. You raise a brass spyglass to your eye. Its lenses ground in Venice, a rare and expensive luxury. You do not look east or west, toward your European neighbours. You look south. Across the 9 miles of churning water, the mountains of Africa rise, their peaks sharp and clear in the morning air. To your ancestors, this was the frontier of Christendom and of sexendom. To you, it is simply the other side of the trench. The war that began in 1492 never ended. It changed shape, it ebbed and flowed, but it never, ever stopped. It has become the central organizing principle of your nation. Spain is not a country with an army. It is an army with a country attached. Through your spyglass, you scan the far shore. You see the white walls of Tangier, a city your great-grandfather helped lose. You see the flag flying from its highest minaret. It is not the banner of a local emir. It is the solid black flag of the Mahdist Caliphate, the unified, theocratic state that stretches from the Atlantic to the borders of Mamluk Egypt. You see patrols of their soldiers, the Ansar, drilling on the beaches, their movements sharp, disciplined. You see the smoke from their foundries, where they cast cannons using techniques copied from French and English mercenaries. You lower the spyglass, and in the silence of the tower, you are struck by the terrible, soul-crushing irony that has defined your life. This is the mirror of Granada. You look across the water and you see a reflection of yourself. The Caliphate is everything Spain has become, only in a different tongue and kneeling to a different god. It is a society organized for perpetual holy war. Its rulers are warrior prophets, its laws are divine. Its schools teach scripture and military science. It is intolerant, puritanical, and deeply suspicious of the outside world. It is unified, from the fractured tribes of the Sahara to the urban artisans of the coast, by a single, burning hatred for the Christian infidel across the water. They have become what you are, or you have become what they are. After 3 centuries, it is impossible to tell the difference. Your Spain is not the Spain of our world. There was no golden age, no Cervantes writing of mad knights on the plains of La Mancha. Your great national literature is a library of martyrs' hagiographies and grim military histories of the African campaigns. There was no Velázquez, no Goya. Your art is stark, religious, and martial, celebrating the stoic endurance of the soldier and the piety of the saint. There was no Spanish Enlightenment. The Inquisition, which faded in other Catholic countries, remains a powerful arm of your state, not to hunt Judaizers, but to root out Mahdist sympathizers and political dissenters who question the wisdom of the forever war. Your nation is poor, proud, and trapped in a prison of its own making. The decision to pour all of its energy south in 1492 was a decision to turn its back on the future. You turn your gaze eastward, toward the wider world. The Islamic world is not the sick man of European condescension. The centuries-long rivalry between the Ottoman Turks and the Safavid Persians, a conflict of titans, never allowed for complacency. It was a Cold War that spurred constant military and administrative innovation. Constantinople and Isfahan are not backwaters. They are the capitals of powerful, centralized empires that have adopted European military technology on their own terms to continue their eternal struggle for supremacy. They see the squabbling states of a fragmented Germany and Italy not as a threat, but as a source of useful mercenaries and technological novelties. Now, you shift your thoughts to the West, to the lands the English call the Americas. It is not a new world dominated by Europe. It is a contested continent. You have read the reports from English traders who cling to their fortified coastal enclaves, Jamestown in the north, Port Royal in the south. They are not the masters of a hemisphere. They are participants in a complex, multi-sided frontier. The ethical tension of this history is profound. The English, French, and Dutch trading companies did not commit the same scale of genocide as the Spanish conquistadors of another history, but their presence has been a slow-acting poison. Their diseases still ravaged populations, and their trade goods, especially guns and alcohol, have destabilized native societies and fueled horrific internal wars. The unexpected twist is the resilience of the great Mesoamerican civilizations. The Aztec, or Mexica, as they call themselves, and the Inca survived. Wounded by plague, yes, but not decapitated by conquest. Their political structures remained intact. Over 2 centuries, they have adapted. They have learned the value of European iron. They have bred vast herds of horses for their cavalry. They are not colonial subjects. They are formidable native powers. And the English settlements on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico exist only by their sufferance, paying tribute for the right to trade for cochineal, silver, and cocoa. An English trader in the port of New Bristol does not see a degraded native population. He sees proud Mexica merchants, flanked by elite Jaguar knights, driving a hard bargain. This is the world that 1492 created. It is a multipolar world without a single dominant civilization. It is a world of powerful blocs, a commercially minded and disunited Europe, dominated by a hegemonic France and a maritime England, a dynamic and self-sufficient Turco-Persian Islamic heartland, a fanatical and expansionist Mahdist caliphate in Africa, and the unconquered, adapting empires of the Americas. It is a world with different technologies, different philosophies, different definitions of progress. The Industrial Revolution is beginning in England, but it is a slow, creeping thing, built on textiles and coal, not fueled by a torrent of plundered gold and silver. You stand in your tower, a general in a forgotten country, and you look at the mirror. Spain made a choice. It chose to finish the last war of the medieval age, rather than begin the first war of the modern one. In its attempt to slay the ghost of its Islamic past, it instead gave that ghost its own flesh and blood, and condemned itself to wrestle with it for eternity. The final victory in Granada was not an ending. It was a beginning. It was the beginning of a world that is not better nor worse, but is forever and irreconcilably other. Is history a river, flowing inevitably toward a single sea called modernity? Or is it a delta, a branching network of 1,000 possible streams, each finding its own path through the landscape of time? The world you have just walked through, born from a single choice made in the halls of the Alhambra, suggests the latter. It is not a tragedy, nor a utopia. It is simply alien. It is a painting made with the same colours as our own, but the composition is so different that it is nearly unrecognizable. The core values that define our world were either never born or were strangled in their cradle. The idea of universal human rights seems an absurd fantasy in a world where the most enlightened colonial power, England, treats with native empires as sovereign rivals, not as peoples to be civilized. The concept of secularism is a laughable heresy in a West, where Spain and the Mahdist Caliphate are locked in a perpetual holy war, and in an East where the rivalry between Sultan and Shah is defined by sectarian zeal. The scientific revolution happened, but it was a science of control in Spain, of profit in Venice, of military application in the Ottoman East. It was a tool, not an ideology. It never broke the chains of faith. It merely reinforced them with stronger steel. What was lost? The staggering, brutal, and ultimately world-changing injection of wealth and resources from the Americas that fueled Europe's rise to global dominance. The Columbian Exchange was a trickle, not a flood. The result was a more balanced world, a world with multiple centers of gravity. But the price of that balance was the absence of the frantic, globe-spanning energy that, for all its horrors, created the interconnected world we now inhabit. What was gained? The survival of worlds. The great civilizations of the Americas were not erased. They were wounded, but they endured, forced to adapt and change in the face of a new threat. The complex web of trade and culture that connected Africa to the wider world was not entirely severed and replaced by the single monstrous artery of the Atlantic slave trade. This world is in some ways richer in its diversity, a mosaic of cultures that in our world were ground to dust. But to call it better is to ignore the mirror image in the watchtower. It is to ignore the cold, efficient evil of the trans-Saharan slave trade, rationalized by Spanish bureaucrats. It is to ignore the cynical, profit-driven neutrality of Venice, growing rich on the suffering of others. The fundamental drivers of human nature, ambition, greed, faith, and fear, remained constant. They simply carved different channels in a different landscape. History is not a morality play. It is a story of consequences. This world is the consequence of a crusade that never ended, an ocean that remained empty for a century too long, and a mirror in which two sworn enemies saw only their own reflection